Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media, Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. I had a story up prior to today about the stuff the Commanders have done to help build around Jayden Daniels and help his game. And today we were out at the first OTA session that we have been able to watch for the Commanders. So I'm going to get to a lot of observations that I had from practice and from the hour and approximately 15-minute practice and a few interviews afterwards. So we'll get to that in a minute. But one reminder for you gold members, are going to be doing a private Zoom for you on Thursday night, 8 o'clock Eastern time. So join me there. Next week, I hope to have on for the private Zoom Anthony Armstrong, of course, a former Redskin receiver. To me, always one of the better spring stories because he kind of came out of nowhere, but he made the team with such a good spring, and he also carried it to the season, which doesn't always happen. He carved out a nice little career for himself, but it started in the spring. So I'm going to have him on at some point next week. I'll let you know the time and the date. So it will not be next Thursday if we're going to do that. So anyways, but tomorrow night, Thursday, for the gold members, if you want to become a gold member, go to the Ampire Media YouTube page, either we're joined, click on that, go from there. So, and I'll have a story on Jayden and just some of the stuff that was said after the OTA session today about where he's at, et cetera, et cetera. But that'll be on ESPN.com on Saturday. So let's get to the observations because it's our first chance to see them. And that's always fun because you get to see there's only so much you can learn, but you can look for little things, right? Some detailed observations on some players. With the offensive line, with the defensive line, it's really hard to get a feel because they're not going up against anybody. The running backs, it's hard to get a feel because they're not, mostly it's a 7-on-7. It's really a passing camp it becomes because that's what you can really work on. You can get a feel for receivers, you can get a feel for defensive backs, and we'll focus a lot on there, especially some of the D-backs, because I think a couple of them had really good days in particular, including Mike Samuel and Trey Amos. So first, a couple of things. Guys who weren't here: Terry McLaurin, Laramie Tunsil, Marshawn Lattimore. With McLaurin, not a surprise, wants to get an extension. This is what I expected. He did this a few years ago when he was looking for an extension. He was not here last week. He had been up here. He had been attending everything prior to missing the OTA session last week. It's a voluntary OTA session. The word voluntary is very important for all of them. And I think there's a couple keys here. One, the coaching staff knows McLaurin very well. They know what he's about. Dan Quinn talked about what a great offseason he's had. So it's not like there's some big concern. This is late May. Don't panic. This is not an issue, but it is noteworthy, but it's not an issue. Now, if you start missing mandatory sessions, a little bit different than if you miss training camp. Well, it's a lot different. So we're a long way from all that. And then same for like Marshawn and Laramie. I don't know what their absences are about. Don't know, right? So I don't want to speculate. I do know, like, clearly, I don't know that Tunsil always attended this stuff in Houston. They know what they have in him. And then with Lattimore, again, he was around them and they've maintained contact with all of them. I think one of the things Quinn does very well is build relationships, which helps in a situation where guys aren't, for whatever reason, aren't here, but as long as there's lines of communication, know what they're doing, know what the expectations are when you come here, then that's what you want. And again, with Tunsil, you're not going up against defensive linemen. It's good to know the playbook. You got to know that, right? You've got to know what you're doing when you want to know the guy next to you. But again, long way to go. So just notable absences, voluntary sessions, go from there. Anyways, let's get to some observations. So Jayden Daniels, same guy, and that's a good thing. Now, I know there's a lot of talk, well, is he bigger? Is he bigger? And we talked about that because there was the picture on social media the other day where it looked like he had some guns. I can say he's a little bit bigger. I wouldn't say it's pronounced, but I think he's stronger. Like that's what it looks like to me. He's always going to be a lean guy, but it's funny because I remember having Ryan Porter on here. I remember his quarterbacks coach from a long time ago was talking about that with him one day and just how like Jayden's dad he was a lean guy and then he just kind of started filling out. And I could see Jayden doing the same thing. He doesn't have to be a big guy. The more sturdy you get, the better it is. But one thing Kingsbury said is his arm is stronger. So always a good thing. But the thing with Daniels is that you want to know he's the same guy. And that's, again, the good thing. Like Tyler Biadasz talked about him being, getting here so early and the work in the weight room that he has done. And Jayden even said he added some weight. How much? Wasn't going to say. Doesn't matter. Right? You're a little bit bigger. That's great. The weight wasn't an issue for him last year with how he's a lean guy. So, but you never look like, oh, he's getting beaten up out there. He learned how to protect himself, and that's the key. More than adding the weight, it's learning how to protect yourself. Because, like, shoot, you remember when Kirk Cousins was here, he started losing weight. He got smaller, but he knew how to protect himself. That's how you last a long time in the NFL. And I think Daniels is there as well. He's still a playful kid, right? I'm a kid. I mean, young man after the group all gets together and he's over there, in before practice starts and somebody's talking to him in the circle. I'm assuming Dan Quinn and Daniels kind of on the outside gets a football, starts doing some pump fakes and shooting the ball and just but you see the way he reacts in drills and like they do the little hype drill before running through the bags and he's running off there. It's like you can see the energy that he has and the excitement that he has and just being out on the field. I think that's where he talked about like all the stuff that's kind of come his way and the attention and all that. But he's like, he considers himself an introvert, but where he likes to be is on that field. And you can tell like the joy that he brings just even in these sessions is there, right? He likes competing, he likes being on the field, likes being with his guys. And I think that's definitely noticeable. One other thing you talked about, like always having to prove himself. And so all the stuff he accomplished last year, I don't think he gives that lip service. Like I don't think he's not the kind of guy who's going to sit there and say, "Well, I did this last year, therefore I can do this," or "I'm automatically going to do this." Like the one thing that with Daniels is he will work to get better because football matters to him, and when it matters to you, I think the process matters to him. Because of that, you're going to see a difference. Now, was everything perfect today? No, and some of that you're working with new guys, and he did miss one deep shot to I think McCaffrey. There was kind of a bust in coverage, and McCaffrey's open down the sideline, right about almost the front part, right by the pylon. Just missed him, overshot him. But I think I'll take my chances with Daniels hitting that pass as in September when it starts to matter. But anyway, again, what you see from him, what you hear from him, what you hear from others has always been good. That hasn't changed. All right. Team spent a lot of time in individual drills. And one thing that Dan Quinn talked about is that compared to last year, where you're putting in offenses, you're putting in this, you're putting that, more about scheme work. Now it's really more about developing individual skills. So it's not necessarily about like, okay, putting in this and that, because there's all that stuff has been put in. There's obviously more you can add to that, and they will. But I think there's a lot of emphasis on developing individual skills. So receivers getting off the line, your footwork with the defensive backs, all with tight ends, whatever it is, like that's where the focus is. And the bulk of this practice was focused on that. Again, it was in about an hour and 15 minutes. Like you saw just receivers running through a gauntlet of teammates trying to punch the ball away, really, tight ends, just working on their balancing, et cetera, linemen coming off the ball, like all that stuff, which is basic, but that's what a lot of it was about. The other thing you saw out there today was Brian Mitchell. So one thing Dan Quinn wanted to do is kind of reconnect with some of the veterans, the alums, I guess, to what can they do to help? Well, Mitchell's a guy who's around the team and has stayed around the game. And so he had him out there today. And I think it was just going to be for today, just kind of talking to some of the punt returners. It wasn't like he was out there demonstrating everything. What I appreciate what Brian did is stayed in the back, like letting, you let the special teams coaches do it, stay in the background and talk to the guys when they're there. Like I watched him talk to Jalen Lane, KJ Osborne, among others, but especially Jalen Lane, because he's going to be their punt returner. And just like talking about, you could just see the motioning of him, like how he caught the ball versus when you're flat, when your feet are together versus when it's one is maybe further back, the way you can plant and drive and where, depending on where you're going to go, et cetera. So like little things like that. But I think, it's smart with not every veteran alum is capable of doing this. So I know there's always guys like this guy should be coaching. Well, not everybody is good at that. And I think with Brian, like, because he's around the team and because they got, he's on the radio and all that, I think I think his stuff kind of resonates. And plus what he accomplished in his career was pretty good. So I don't know how much Quinn will do this. I think he'll do this a little bit more with some guys. I don't know that every guy that who has played here, it's going to be applicable. Just because they did something many, many years ago doesn't mean that they're, what can they tell help now, right? Sometimes it's just about process, right? And that can be a help too. But with Mitchell, he's out there, one of the things Quinn talked about with him later was like, this is a guy who did not return punts or kicks until he got to the NFL. He really, so clearly that speaks to work ethic and what helped you get there. And that's one of the things he can help with as well. So smart idea. And I think B Mitch is a good guy to do this. And we'll see if they have any other guys out here at times. It could happen again. I don't know that we're not going to see a parade of them, but I do think it's a good way to keep some guys involved. Um, the other thing you can tell it was year two of a group, right? Not that it certainly wasn't happy. It certainly wasn't chaotic last year. I just think, when you're going out there and just, I think the crispness of things, you can tell that it's year two. Um, I think coaches and players, I mean, one of the benefits of the staff, and even Quinn talked about how rare it is to have every coach return. Like that is massive because anybody who's ever coached knows like you can now, like, even if you keep the system the same, if the voices around that, like, for example, if Cliff Kingsbury had left, but then you promote Brian Johnson, well, now you do have a different voice. You have the same system, but different voices in different roles. So there, you don't have there's still an adjustment period with that, right? Because you're getting to know somebody in a different role. But with this staff, all the same, and so you can jump right in, like they know, like Cliff Kingsbury knows what Jayden likes and wants. And he knows what he's good at. Like, and you know where you left off last season. What things were you building toward? That's a big deal. And that's one of the things that I think really resonates with Quinn. And it really gives the staff an advantage. Like how much of one, don't know, but it definitely helps. Deebo Samuel, our first look at him. So he talked about how he felt like he was in better shape. He does, if you saw pictures of him compared to last year, he looks a little bit bigger this year. I don't know what that means. I just know that he does. He feels like he's in a good spot and he knows like this is an opportunity he has to take advantage of. And so you see that size. And I think, certainly helps. It can certainly help. For the role they're going to have him in. I think for it to last at that. But let's see where he looks like in August when training camp, or late July, August for training camp, and then during the season, because we don't know him in any way. So it's hard to say. It's hard to make a judgment based on that, because I know there's always been a focus on his weight. What I know is like they're excited to have him, and he feels pretty good to be here, and that's what I know. And so, we will see on him, but there were definitely some times today where that size helps, because on some inside slants from the slot position going against certain corners, like it's going to help. And the way they're going to use him, I could see that being a plus. But he again feels pretty good about the plan they have for him to get into the kind of shape that he wants, because it is a big and key year for him. Cute, like some of the stuff that you look at is the details of what they work on. And there's just little things like this is just a little detail, but I think it's something that, and I'm sure they do this all the time, but it just noticed today more how the quarterback's working on like taking a shotgun snap, but taking bad shotgun snaps. So the ball's low, the ball's high and away. How do you handle that? Just kind of getting used to handling a bad snap. Little thing, but it helps. I felt like Mike Samerstill had a good day at corner, and like really good year last year, obviously. A lot of time spent in the slot and covering Deebo Samuel. Saw him break up a pass inside and a slant to Samuel. Saw him, let's see, oh, there's one time receiver breaks inside and he's on the inside shoulder, just comes up, breaks up the ball. Nice job on a crosser to boy, I can't remember who, to the receiver on the going to the outside. And what I liked with Sam still, he's in a little, trailing, but he sees the eyes, sees the way the receiver is reacting, turns and knocks the ball away. Good job by him. So I felt like good eyes and good reaction by him. Trey Amos, really like him. And again, like there's a long way to go in this process, but it's our first look at him. So this is my first look at him, and then the first look at him against veteran receivers, which is key because that's who you got to go against. A couple things that jump out. I like his footwork, and I think he's a smooth player. And I think he can be a very patient player as well. Also covered some Deebo Samuel on the outside. One time Samuel runs deep, he just turns and runs with him. Ball not they're thrown to him. One time against Michael Gallup, Gallup cuts inside. Now Amos breaks on the ball, like there's some contact. I don't know, was this a SGA Shea Gilgis Alexander kind of knockdown by Gallup trying to draw a foul? But I do think there was some contact. And I do think, maybe it would have been a foul. But it was I will say this, like if it was, I still like the play by Amos because the way he's driving on the ball, right? And he ends up Gallup goes down, he ends up just right there for the pick. If it's not like he was grabbing him and doing all this, like I think that's something you can, if they felt like it was a penalty, that you can clean up with him. But the positioning was really good on that, and so that's where I'm going to go to. Like sometimes you see these young corners, and they're very grabby, like grabbing up here, grabbing over. You saw this with guys like Bashad Breeland, you saw it with St. Juiced. Well, that stuff translates and carries over. You really a bad habit. This time, if there was one, it was to me, it was positioning maybe a little bit eager. Regardless, good positioning like that. So I liked what I saw from him a couple times against Luke McCaffrey. I felt like there was a mix of results for both players. But I think, what I did like in when Amos was playing man coverage, the eyes, the patience. I saw him one time just with a good jab to the inside shoulder to slow the receiver a little bit and then turn and run with him and break with him. He breaks well with the receiver. So a good job by him. Again, I don't want to, it's the first day, it's late May, but you saw what you wanted to see from him, right? A guy who can play the position, certainly does not look overmatched there at all. And that's a good sign because if he did look overmatched, that would be a problem. That wasn't the case. There was one time in the red zone where think it was Jacoby Jones running a route, and I think Madrano, tries to reroute, or just kind of nudges him as a little bit of a reroute, slow him down a little bit, runs a pivot route. He runs a pivot route inside, and Amos does a nice job breaking with him on both ways. So I think there's a lot to like and to build on there. He's a guy I really liked before the draft, and I think it was a good pick, and I think he's going to help. Jonathan Jones also worked outside, good veteran to have. I would expect a veteran in this kind of camp to look good, and I think he did. Carlin Vigors, the undrafted corner, good size, can be physical. Slipped a couple times, but I like the size, the physicality. Don't know what he's going to, who knows where he fits just yet, but that's something that jumped out was just the size. Madrano is an athletic guy, long way to go to see what he can do and see what he gets when he's matched up more one-on-one with receivers and tight ends. Saw some of that today. Again, didn't look overmatched, but I would like to see him in some one-on-one drills, see how he handles some of those. Those are designed for receivers or the offensive guy to win, but still like to see a lot more and just see where he can go and get to. One of the things too on Deebo, I forgot to say this too, with Jayden Daniels, he was asked about him, of course, and his comment was what has jumped out with him is Jayden can make every throw, thinks he's very smart, thinks he's a great player. So just pass it along. I think you already know that, but Deebo Samuel knows it now too because he's played with them, and I think it's like he said, one of the things that Samuel talked about too is how he feels like he's been here for a long time. When he walked in the locker room, it felt like he had been here a long time because just how guys embraced him and how just the familiarity and just the ease of how players are in the locker room. All right, couple things on the offensive line. They make it clear with these rookies, Jayden Daniels had to win a job last year. So do you. So Josh Connolly not working with the starters at this point, nor should he be. Win the job, get the job, keep the job. That's the plan here. And this is one of the reasons why they did what they did with Daniels last year, because if you have to make him the number 2 overall pick win the job, then every single player who comes here thereafter has to win the job. So hey, did it with Jayden, doing it with you too, just so you know that. And I don't, if you want a guy who's a competitor, that's what you want anyways. So Connolly was not working with the starters, and with Tunsil out, it was Trent Scott. there wasn't a lot of full offensive line work. The one time we saw a little bit of a drill toward the end of practice where they actually lined up five across, and it was Trent Scott at left tackle, it was Coleman at left guard, Biotis, of course, Allegretti at right guard, Wiley at right tackle. That's not how the line's going to look this year, but I do think where Coleman would be a left guard, certainly that's where they're going to have to look at him because it makes sense. Like, why would you put him anywhere else unless he plays right tackle? You don't want, if you think he's going to be a guard, fixture at guard, you're going to put him at left guard because you have your right guard, even though Sam Cosmi is hurt. He's your right guard for the future, starting whenever he comes back. And by the way, Quinn said that Cosmi has been hitting every marker so far. So what that, excuse me, what that means for his timetable, it just means he's on pace to return at a proper time, whatever time that is. So whether it's early October, late October, November, we don't know yet. So anyways, but again, no surprise with that. And so it was hard to get a really good feel for the running backs. We tried to watch Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt a little bit, but it's hard. It's just hard to get a feel for them because all I really saw him do is catch a few passes. It looks fine there, but where he's going to make his mark is a runner. So we're not going to see that until the pads come on, until they're in camp and all that. So in case you're wondering about that. And by the way, one of the things that Quinn talked about too with the playbook and Jayden Daniels, and like, oh, teams get a chance to see him. He's like, hey, they didn't show everything in their playbook either. So there's a way, like they have stuff they can still get to in their playbook. And this is where being in year two in a system for him and for having Kingsbury back really matters. And so I think like that's a good thing. And finally, when watching Jalen Lane, smooth, smooth with his punt returns. Also like the way he just kind of snatched the ball out of the air on some of these are passes against on air. But felt like just something to watch, right? It's your first impression, and it's about the only thing you really saw because during the 7-on-7 didn't see him doing a whole lot, at least when I was able to watch. And there, when you're watching that too, just so you know, like I'm focusing on a matchup, and sometimes the matchup is elsewhere, right? Or sometimes the play goes elsewhere. But I'm trying to watch what does Trey Amos look like? What is Sanders still looking like inside? What is Deebo Samuel looking like, right? So that's what we're doing. Noah Brown. One of the things I liked with him is even on some of the drills, like the way he does a nice job of kind of extending his arms last second. So basically, when sometimes D-backs are obviously going to read the receiver when they're extending their arms. Well, he a couple times would do it last second. And I just feel like that's a way to give another advantage for him. The fact that he's out there was a really good sign, and he looks kind of the same. But I think that's a good sign for them too, for sure. And then a couple other things like Gallup did have a nice little comeback route against Amos, caught the ball, and then they ran some 2-minute stuff and just working on late game situations, something they were excellent at last year, of course. So they were doing more work on that. And it's funny because last year they worked on situational football as much as any team that I've covered that I can remember. And it definitely paid off. And they started that. We saw that again today. So, anyways, that's it for me. I will be back on Monday with another episode, probably doing some 5 things I think I will be talking. I'm scheduled to talk to Dietrich Wise for a podcast. I'm going to talk to him tomorrow on sometime this week. Run that probably on Tuesday. So we got that coming. Then we have another OTA session next week. And again, for you club members, I'm working with the schedule with Anthony Armstrong to schedule him for next week as a guest. But you get me tomorrow night on the private Zoom. So there you go. That's it for me, folks. Thank you for tuning in, and talk to you next time.